Welcome back. You're watching Your World at 10. Now, markets around the world woke up to a pleasant surprise today. As we've been telling you, the EU and the IMF have put together an emergency aid package totaling nearly $1 trillion, a size that Europe's government hopes provides shock and awe to the markets. Well, that's exactly what it's done for equity markets and the euro across the world. Joining us to talk about that EU-IMF plan, Gerard Lyons, Chief Economist and Group Head of Global Research at Standard Chartered, and Steve Hanke, Professor of Applied Economics at the Johns Hopkins University and a Senior Fellow at the Cato Institute. Gerard, Professor Hanke, thank you very much for joining us. Gerard, what did you make of this attempt to shock and awe? Equity markets across the world have reacted very positively, as has the euro.
Well, I would say about time too, actually. The European leaders, or so-called leaders, have dragged their feet for weeks, if not months. Markets have dictated the pace of events. Greece basically had to accept a package last week reluctantly. And I think what we've seen from the European Union with the IMF's help is a realisation that they had to do something to ward off the speculators in terms of the euro itself, and also to actually show that they had enough firepower to actually prevent contagion within Europe. I would say in that respect it's a market-friendly development, but the reality is it still doesn't get over the fundamental underlying core problem in the euro, and clearly it doesn't actually prevent the Club Med countries, or so-called Club Med countries, having pretty much a deflation depression for the next few years. So in the near term it was a positive market development, preventing contagion, warding off the speculators, but there are still deep-rooted economic problems, particularly at the periphery in Europe.
Gerard, are you saying then that this $1 trillion aid package could likely only postpone the problems that many of these countries are facing, and that it really doesn't do anything to help solve the sovereign debt issue that we're likely to be dealing with for the better part of this new decade?
Okay, well, actually, it clearly does help. It prevents the contagion, it's allowed yields to come down, it's allowed credit spreads to fall, and it's eased fears of an immediate sovereign debt crisis within the Eurozone. What it doesn't do, and it's difficult to see how the Eurozone could have done anything on this front, is to actually overcome the economic problem. Basically, what we have is a monetary union where not all the countries are the same. One size in terms of monetary policy doesn't fit all. And basically, Greece, Portugal, Spain and Ireland, and maybe to a lesser extent Italy, are having to implement austerity measures that will severely hit their domestic growth. So that this package doesn't get over that, but coming back to your question, clearly it does help. It eases market problems, it reduces immediate pressure in terms of a sovereign debt crisis, and in that respect it is a show of strength by both the IMF and the European Union leaders.
Professor Hanke, you're looking at this from the outside, from across the Atlantic. What do you make of finally this move coming in that will probably help stem at least the nervousness and the volatility that markets across the Eurozone were seeing, and as a result markets across the world were seeing?
Well, I agree with Mr. Lyons in terms of, it stopped the free fall, shall we say, put a Band-Aid on the situation that will probably temporarily hold, but we're seeing really a modest relief rally only. The levels for the stock market and the euro and oil prices and gold price, everything is still way away from where it was a couple of weeks ago. So it's a temporary palliative. I think the fundamental problems are extremely serious and haven't really been addressed by any of the discussion that's gone on in Greece since February. And the fundamental problems are summarized by just looking at the World Bank's Doing Business 2010 report. And they have a ranking in there of how easy it is to do business. In short, how competitive you are. And Greece ranks 109 out of 183 countries that are ranked by the World Bank. It's a Soviet-style economy, completely corrupt, inflexible, not competitive. They can't follow the rules, and I disagree with Mr. Lyons on the one-size-fits-all thing. That is, the Eurozone, they have one currency, and one currency does work very well as long as everyone's following the rules. And Greece and some of the Club Med countries, Spain and Portugal in particular, to some extent Italy, have a great deal of difficulty following the rules and telling an honest story. They can't even keep the books right.
Professor Hankey, do you think this puts to rest, to some extent, the debate that's been going on for many months regarding the survival of the Eurozone, the survival of one unified currency? Or do you think that, like you put it, it's a temporary palliative and that those issues have now been pushed up for debate maybe 6 months or a year down the line, but they're definitely not going to go away?
I don't think they'll go away. However, I also don't think the euro is going away either.
All right, let me see what Jared has to say about the future of the euro. Jared, it's been saved this time round, but what do you make of all the talk of the last few months on whether the eurozone will survive this sovereign debt crisis and whether the euro will survive it?
Well, I think it will survive, but I don't think it will survive with all the existing members in it. At some stage, the euro will come to a fork in the road, and at that fork, it will have to decide which countries will join a political union, and at that stage, which countries will not join the political union. For a single currency area like the eurozone to survive, it needs a number of preconditions. One is complete labour mobility. You should be able to go in search of jobs anywhere within the zone, and we have that some or most extent, but the second other key condition is that you need a central treasury. Basically, you need a political union. You need the wealthy areas, the good parts of the zone, to be able to bail out, help out the poorer parts. That's hard enough to do within one country, but it's almost nigh impossible within a sort of monetary union. Grudgingly, the Germans and others have helped out the Club Med countries in this instance, primarily because they knew that if they didn't, the contagion would be worse and that their own banking sector would be clobbered very hard indeed. What we've seen here is a significant help to the core banking sector across Europe, which in itself is a good thing. But in terms of the Eurozone, basically it has to become a political union. And so in answer to your question, yes, it will survive with Germany, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, France, maybe one or two others. In terms of the Club Med countries, quite frankly, Greece, Portugal, Spain, Ireland face very, very, very negative growth conditions over the next couple of years, effectively deflating their economies. So in that respect, the political opposition to the euro will grow. So what we have here is a positive development. It helps out. But as Professor Hankey touched on, basically there's big structural problems in Greece and other countries. I agree with him on that. There's also a loss of competitiveness on top of that. So I think that the eurozone does survive. Whether this is the fork in the road or whether this just moves us closer to that key moment remains to be seen. I think it just moves us closer to it, maybe a 1 or 2 years away yet.
Jared, can you give us shed some light on the operative parts of this 1 trillion bailout or aid package? How does it work? So if Greece does, I know that the yields on Greece sovereign debt have actually come down thanks to this move, but if Greece does need to access this fund, will the money be immediately available, or does it still need to go through political sanctions from some of the EU countries, so to speak? How easy is it going to be? Because over the weekend, we've had Angela Merkel lose an important regional election. We've also had Britain come out and say we're not going to bear the expense of trying to sort of defend the euro in any fashion. So how easy is it going to be for countries to be able to access any money in the fund?
Well, there's two different parts in terms of my answer. First is Greece, and then second is the rest of the zone. Right. In terms of Greece, I pretty much interpreted it that Greece would get its money. That was agreed basically last Thursday and Friday. What we've had here is an additional huge amount. Applying, getting it, and the disbursement of it, there are still some issues that need to be addressed. But in terms of the Greece aspect, I pretty much see this as Greece having already sort of been given the thumbs up that it can have access to the money, and effectively that keeps Greece out of the markets for the next 2 to 3 years. But you're right to ask the question. But I think that the political willing is there. In terms of the makeup of the fund, well, we've got the special purpose vehicle, 440 billion euros, the IMF with 250 billion euros, and then the European Central Bank has had a Saul-like conversion since last Thursday when they said they wouldn't buy any government bonds, and now they say that they will buy bonds in dysfunctional markets. So I think all the political aspects have been pulled together. But you're right, there are some sort of technical aspects, but I don't think they will prevent Greece getting its money. And I think the fact that the money is there should dampen market pressures to sort of try and test Portugal and Spain in the next few weeks or months.
Professor Hankey, do you believe that other countries outside of Greece will need to be able to access this fund, or the very fact that it has been created will help ease the nervousness, the run on some of the sovereign debts for some of these countries that was taking place over the past few weeks, and that it might actually not, some of these countries may not need to access any bailout money of any sort?
Well, I think that Europe is in fairly serious trouble from a growth perspective, because if you look at broad money growth, it's not growing in Europe. I mean, credit isn't growing in general, and the recent problems with Greece and some of the other Club Med countries have just aggravated the problem. Banks are very concerned about extending credit, and as a result, the money supply, the broad money measures, M3 and M4, really aren't growing. So that means that nominal growth in Europe is not going to happen anyways in the near term. And as a result, there'll be continued pressure on Greece and the Club Med countries. So I anticipate that Greece ultimately is going to have to restructure its debt. There is no way they can proceed without restructuring their debt. It's just a matter of the numbers. And I think there's a pretty good chance that we'll see some other problems developing and kind of a little eruption, shall we say, in Spain, perhaps Portugal, even perhaps Italy. So they will attempt to tap the money, and if the money is there, if it actually is there, it's a honeypot. Everyone wants to get into the money. So if the money is there, the politicos and the bureaucrats will want to get it.
All right, Professor Hankey, Jared Lyons, thank you very much for joining us. Not very clear on whether this $1 trillion aid package will help solve Europe's systemic problems over the long term, but at least for now, it's given nervous markets a respite, so that's good news. Well, we need to take a quick break on Your World at 10. We're going to come back with all the national and political news headlines.